Okay, hello everyone. So this is my first podcast for this semester. It developed from our first collaborate. So please find the collaborate on LearnLine, so you will find it easily. Now, um, we have agreed in our collaborate session that I would explain to you assignment 1. So I just opened the assignment on my computer, or the description of the assignment, and you will see it's only 40%. The reason why I give assignment 1 less weight is because it is your first assignment in this unit. So if you want to actually get a good grade for the whole unit, even if things do not go always that fabulously in assignment 1, you can clearly pick up in assignment 2, right? So that's what we want. So I probably should have written here minimum, right? We would just minimum 1500 words. I probably should change it one day on LearnLine. So no arguments here. If someone wants to write 10,000 words, please do, whatever. I still have the same criteria, but I want to see minimum 1500 words. So any student who's submitting 300 words, that ain't gonna be good. There will be no difference between a student who submitted 10,000 words and 1500 words. I will now explain what I'm after. So you can probably squeeze it in between 15 and 2000 words, what I'm after, okay? So what you need to do, right? So what is it that you need to do in the assignment? You need to respond to these questions. So all of this has to be in the assignment, right? So the assignment wants you to do something, which is right here, but what you need to respond to are these questions. Now, let me say it that out of, say, if I get 100 assignments, there will be about 10% of assignments that will miss those questions, some of them, or some of those, not questions, what will we call them? Components. So please do not miss them. They're all equally important, right? So do not get tired in the middle, or, just respond to those. Okay, so what you need to do is to produce an online portfolio. Again, if it stresses you, if you feel you will not recover from that portfolio trouble, just do it in Word or PowerPoint. I'm very happy with it. I don't really mind, but the unit encourages you to play with those different online systems. You will find tutorials how to actually use those systems on YouTube. So all of that I discussed in our collaborate session. So one thing that I need to say, for as long as I have still your attention fresh, is that you need to know that this is not your family album, this portfolio, right? So if you say to me, I've got 3 daughters and I read to them daily and we're really a happy family, that's a family album. The difference here is that this has to be an assignment that I need to assess in regard to how well you control anything which is relevant to literacy and to pedagogy and to the curriculum, right? So that's what I will be looking for. So each of those components here actually identifies the kinds of pages that you will have in your portfolio. So one page will answer, or one page or one part, one section of your portfolio will give me an answer to what is literacy, and you elaborate on it upon your readings. Another one, it's what literacy practices do you currently engage with regularly and how. I would actually teach you how to answer this question. I never have changed this assignment since it was actually, this unit was run, I don't know how many years ago. But I certainly am saying this is not a list. Please do not create a list. Right. So what I want you to do is actually, I will run you, I will run this, I'll take you through this task. What I want you to do, as you describe your particular literacy activity, I want you to critically engage in the description so that it reflects your ability actually to engage with the Australian curriculum, which is said right here at the top, right? So you cannot say to me, I do this, I write, I send emails, I look at Facebook. That's not a literate person. A literate person is a person who can in depth understand what literacy is for and how strategically they use those tools of literacy in order to be an effective communicator, contributing to their own life and as a result probably to other people's lives, right? Because we cannot contribute to our own life without actually contributing to other people's lives. Because our value is always reflected in relation to what we are to other people. And we know that our wages are one factor that actually reflects this kind of relationship, right? So no lists, but a thorough analysis of a specific activity. Now, some of you are 50, some of you are 20. Some of you will have activities in literacy activities that the analysis in relation to the curriculum will say you're fantastic, you could get a Nobel Prize, right? But some of you will not. Then when information is missing, you can write things like, I never thought about this particular aspect when doing this particular literacy activity. Now on reflection, I believe this and this is involved, and for these and these reasons, right? Then it shows that you are expanding. So this assignment is not just to please me, but it's also for you to actually reflect what engaging in literacy practices actually means. Or to put it differently, what it means to be an effective member of the modern Australian society. And I'm just digressing now because, I'm a teacher. We're all digressing sometime. But you know that literacy from module 1, you learned that literacy was created for what? I mean, nobody just sat down and say, now I'm going to make my students' life difficult and I'm going to create literacy. Literacy was created because we started doing farming and you owed me something and I owed something to someone else and 5 people owed me something. We needed to record information. Economy grew. And as economy grew, we needed to record information. And then we had to record it in a way that allowed us to actually know what those clay tablets were actually saying. Because if I have 20 people owing me money, not money, but money or anything for my wheat, for my whatever else I was growing, and for my cows and whatever they had back then in Mesopotamia. So I had to manage it. So they started to actually create tables, right? So the spreadsheet is as old as the world, a recorded world. So people were starting to create, so they started first with little hieroglyphs, then they started to create tables. So as economy grew, needs were becoming more complex, so people were starting to actually develop increasingly more complex and more portable, remember, more portable literacy tools. So when you analyze your activity, we will use the curriculum because it provides us with particular descriptors to actually ask of ourselves questions. What level of complexity literacy, a specific literacy practice that we want to describe, what level of complexity does it actually reflect? And that's called critical evaluation. Critical evaluation doesn't mean Well, I'm good, Anya, because I do this and this and this and this. Critical doesn't mean I'm good. No doesn't mean I'm bad. Critical means looking, identifying particular criteria which are independent from your thinking, like for example, criteria in the curriculum, and now look into those criteria and think about it, what they involve, right? So you gather information, oh my God, this criterion must be involving this and this and this. So you gather information about each of those criteria, and then you think, oh my goodness, do I do all that? And that's critical thinking. Oh my goodness, I've gathered all this information about each of those criteria. And now when I think about it, I'm not going to tell Anya I'm so poor in literacy. I'm going to make up a story. And I will believe you. I don't really mind. Either way, whether you say that this is what you do and it's a lie, I'm happy with it. Or you might say, this is what I do, and these are the things I don't do for this activity, but I could supplement now and I'm learning, and I could do this and this and this and this and this, right? So there. Hope you understood that. Right, so these, how many is it? 5? 1, 2, 3, 4 aspects. So 4 things you have to actually include. I prefer them on separate pages or as separate sections because I can then actually access them separately. So all statements that describe, that name something, that name an activity. So I go to school doesn't have to be reference, but things like these particular things are good for those and those things. Where did you get it from? The idea that something is good for something, right? So that needs to be referenced inside of the text. And also I want to see a page with all the references, right? References are very important. We know that. It doesn't teach you not to steal. What it does teach you is to have a professional library of evidence that you are part of the community of people who are actually in the discipline of education, right? So that's what I mean, I know university sells it as don't plagiarize, don't steal, be honest. These are good values, but what it really is important, references is important for you to actually show you are part of the greater community, right? You don't stick like a sore thumb somewhere knowing nobody, because that's not really healthy. Okay, so let's move into the assignment itself. Okay, so just before I go from this thing, so you've got assignment criteria. So so components must be included, right? So all of that must be included. Assessment criteria is something that guides my assessment, right? I want to see whether these things actually appear. So this is all about depth and scope, right? So you can read it for yourselves. So before I just go into the detail, which is somewhere here, that's when we start to do the detail. But before we go there, I wanted to talk about module 1. It's interesting. Module 1 is interesting, right? I love those videos and all of that. It's interesting. What it does, it actually develops your tongue, start getting sort of talking about literacy in a more professional way. But what it also does, it makes the case, which I just described before, what literacy is, right? So that's why those recordings, and that's why the particular texts which I included there, they help you to actually better understand that literacy is not, it's not something abstract out there to be used, but in fact literacy involves complexity that needs to be actually explored so that you as a person or as a member of a society can identify most effective things so that you actually effectively communicate, right? There's a very famous guy, he's a sociologist, he's now in Oxford, before he was in University of New York, and he used to say that we always play to win, right? So you don't open your mouth in order to sabotage yourself unless you have that intention. Most of the time you open your mouth in order to actually have the desired impact. So literacy is actually a literate person is a person who can who knows the range, can actually look for specific literacy tools and use them for the best effect. Remember, I mean, I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember how when the time when Obama won the presidency. It was some years ago, and he was the first president who actually used the internet quite extensively, and people were saying that he actually won because of that. And just the other day, Donald Trump did the same thing. I mean, he's on Twitter. I mean, how low can you go? I'm not criticizing, but what I'm saying is, can you imagine the Queen of England on Twitter, right? And Trump said, I'm not the Queen of England. I'm just going to use Twitter. And since there's a billion of people on Twitter, he was accessible to every one of those people, right? So a person, so there is no appropriate tool for a particular context. There's no such a direct link. What there is an intelligent person who explores tools, literacy tools, and identifies the one that they believe will be an effective tool for them. So in module 1, you have all these questions, but I would like you to think about, but even just as much as I said, now, is quite good enough already for you to say that it is about the communicator's power, right? Nobody is actually, so nobody says, oh, today I want to write a book. In order to write a book, I have to use a pen and paper or a computer or something. Again, people have to explore, check on YouTube what would be the most effective tools, explore what a book looks like, what are the different types of books. They play with different constructs, literacy constructs, and then they might create something that has never existed before, right? That's how, what do you call that music? I'm a little bit away from mass media, when they rap, right? Rap didn't exist before, now it does. How did it happen? Because someone put two and two together and created something new. So these are the sort of things for you to think about. So we've discussed the text of assignment 1. Let's now go to assignment 1 and how to actually respond. Now, if we work with the Australian curriculum for assignment 1, we're working with the Australian curriculum. For assignment 2, we will see how it translates the Australian curriculum, how it translates into the early years framework. The structure of both documents is pretty much the same, although you might not actually think it, but actually at the most abstract level, they're the same. They have higher and lower level, right? So these are the lower. This is the lower level of the organization. This is the higher level of the organization, and that's how you do when you want to become an intellectual, a person who is a professional teacher, a person who teaches other people. What you need to do is to learn how to structure things. Structuring things is really hard. It's one of the hardest things for human beings to do because it requires you to actually identify relationships between things. And then you have to identify relationships in terms of some order. What's higher, what's lower. And you can see what I produced here on this slide, you will probably not find in many texts because people can't see it this way. But here it goes. Despite of the common knowledge that you should be teaching content, in fact, if you were teaching content, question is what will you do with those things? You would turn them into content too, and then you will turn these into content, and you have so much content you would just die, right? And that's why people say Australian curriculum is actually over whatever, just too much information in it. That's because people don't know how to organize it and how to work with it. But when you actually see that all you have to do is to teach capabilities in the context of activities that engage any of those or all of them, and using content as a pathway for that purpose, right? So you don't teach content unless it actually directly engages those through those activities that engage those aspects and engage also all the capabilities. Because they actually, what we want actually is critical people who can actually be participants in a society. And that's what the capabilities are actually saying, right? So what the Melbourne Declaration says is actually captured by the capabilities. Now you will see that I put ICT and literacy a little bit on the right, in the right corner, because I think that someone just added them on just to make sure that you don't forget as teachers. But I think that ICT and literacy will be actually somewhere here. But I'll just put them there for a moment, because that's not, because they're integrated in whatever you do. But these are different. These are value-based capabilities. ICT is not a value. Literacy is not a value. These are values. That's why they're high level. Okay, so these are values. These are context of activities. And this is just a content that has lists, like a checklist of things for you to actually make sure that you have somehow engaged those items from the content in order to enable in those activities to enable the learning of those. And certainly you will, as you do that, you will engage technology, because we can't not, and you will, literacy is part of it, because it doesn't matter whether you did geography, history, or English itself, we can't do without literacy. Okay. So each of you will be a teacher in a different school, different level, high school, middle school, and you will integrate literacy in different ways. Now, forget everything else which you see on this slide. Just look at this structure here. This structure I just pulled out from the English curriculum. So we have language literacy, language literature and literacy. If you have perfect eyes, you can actually even read the text here. But this is not important what these things say. You can go to the curriculum and identify what they say. But the point is now, how do we integrate this structure into this? That's the question, right? The question is, we've got all those properties, and then we have all these capabilities and all of that. And the task is to identify, to describe or critically evaluate a particular activity. Let's assume, like which one, guys? What do you think? I'm reading to my 2-year-old child, right? 2-year-old child is very good. I'm reading to my 2-year-old child every night. This is my activity. So how am I gonna now describe this activity in relation to all of that, and all of that? So what you are saying, Ania, is that I can use those descriptors, right? Absolutely, right? Now that's the idea. You use those descriptors to help yourself to actually tell me a story about this. All right, but that's only 3/4 of the solution, right? There's a little bit left to the solution, so that you actually know how to talk about those criteria, right? So if you have the content, how the heck do you talk about, for example, language? What is it? I can't read. I'm blind. Look, friends, I'm not blind. I am a little bit blind, but really, okay. So language variation, for example, or text in context. How do we talk about those items in relation to this, right? So someone has to tell us. So my job is to explain to you, how can we talk about an activity that we want to describe in our portfolio? For example, I read to my 2-year-old daughter or 3-year-old daughter every night. How can we describe this activity in terms of how how can we describe this activity by assessing by assessing the quality of it in relation to these descriptors and those levels? Oh my God, it's really hard. Now look, for module 1 or for week 1 and 2, that's all you need to know, right? This is the question. Now, I will take you now in part 2 of this video, of this podcast, into the detail of it. But before you get a headache, I just wanted to tell you that that's all that you need to know for this week, right? But I'll create part 2 now, and then you can, if you really are still eager to know what to do with all these goodies, then you can actually go and watch part 2.